Namaskar. My name is Dada Maheshvarananda. I'm a yogic monk of Ananda Marga. I've been a yoga monk for 46 years now, but in 1985, I was working in Manila, Philippines. We had an old rented house in the old part of the city, and we were three monks and seven young volunteers, brothers, living there together. We were pretty poor. We were running social service projects. We ran kindergarten schools and slums. We ran medical camps. We ran an orphanage. But we were living hand to mouth pretty much. We were pretty broke all the time. One night, 1 kilometer away from us, there was a big fire. A slum, 50,000 people lost their homes that night. And the water was turned off when the fire broke out. The people were very suspicious that it was intentional because the president, the dictator, Marcos and his wife Imelda, they wanted the people to all leave and they would build expensive housing there. People didn't want to leave. So when there's no water, 50,000 homes burned. Our boys in the streets were getting all this news. A very effective way to get news in the Philippines. My fellow monk was standing beside me and said, "We should do disaster relief." I quickly thought and said, at the moment, we only have 10 kilos of rice and $8. How can we feed anybody with that? Don't argue, just go with the flow. Okay. We called the meeting. The seven brothers, we gave them $5 to pay for their bus to and from the all-night wholesale market. This is the big market that goes all night, and restaurants and other vendors come to buy in wholesale quantities to ask for donations. That monk and I, we walked together to the fire site. He had run a kindergarten school there previously, knew some people, and everybody was in shock. We found the barangay captain. He said, I don't know. What can we do? I don't know. We don't even have bathrooms here. What if we bring food? Yeah. Anything. Across the street from where the fire was a Catholic convent. We asked the nun. Already her parking lot was full of refugees. Can we distribute food here? Of course, she said. Wonderful. So as we walked back home, we stopped at a tiny little store that was lit by only one candle. And my friend bought a big piece of ginger root and 2 cans of milk. I said, "You're not going to feed many people with that." Don't argue, just go with the flow. All right, mum's the word. We walked back. it's 1 o'clock in the morning. We put a big pot on, put the milk and water and the ginger root in. And when it was hot, we carried it back to the convent. We find a little table somehow, and people started lining up because most of them had gotten as much of their furniture and things out before the fire swept through their house. As they're lining up, I have this big pot with a ladle, and suddenly, a stranger taps me on the shoulder and says, "Wait here, don't go." I'm not going anywhere. I got all this milk to give away. 20 minutes later, when we had finished giving away all the milk, the same man returns and says, "I was so inspired by what you guys are doing. I just bought $200 of bread rolls. But I don't know how to give this stuff away, so you do it, please." Okay. $200 is a lot of bread rolls. So we each grab big plastic bags and start walking up and down the highway where all the people were camped out, sitting on top of all their belongings. It's 3 o'clock in the morning now. I'm giving bread to anybody who's still awake. Some teenage boy said, "What? No margarine? Where's the jelly?" But they were laughing with me, not at me. We gave all the bread away. We walked home. It's 5 o'clock. Just as we arrived, the boys arrived from the all-night wholesale market. They had 12 huge sacks full of vegetables because all the vendors in the all-night market, they had also heard the same news we were hearing from the streets, and they all gave donations for the fire victims. We put a big pot on, we put rice in, we put vegetables in, we made rice stew and some very tasty spices called lugaw in Philippines. And this rice stew, this big pot, we carried to the fireside, put another big pot, we only had 2 gas burners there, big pot on the 2 burners, and started the second pot. I got on the telephone and I started calling all our members and asked them if they could come and help cook. And they did. They all started coming very early, listening to music, chopping, telling stories. They were having a wonderful time. Then I started calling everyone else we knew of, friends of friends, business people we had taught yoga to once upon a time. And I asked everyone, "Can you make any donation for the fire victims?" 7:30, the first car arrives. They pop the trunk, boom, 50-kilo sack of rice, and they drove off. 8:30, a second car arrives. They pop the trunk, 250-kilo sacks of rice, boom, boom, and a case of baked beans. Everything went into the rice stew. We did not cook, we did not serve breakfast, lunch, or dinner. From 6 o'clock in the morning until midnight, for 3 days and nights, we continually served rice stew. I remember well because that's all I ate for 3 days and nights too. Finally, on the 4th day, the government finally arrived and started distributing cestas básicas, baskets of uncooked food. The slum dwellers had already started, many of them had already started rebuilding their shacks the moment the fire was out. And others had gone in with relatives. They were cooking for themselves. The disaster was over. But 2 journalists from the largest newspaper in the Philippines at that time, was called the Bulletin Today. And they had been covering the story of the fire from the beginning. And they reported that the Ananda Marga Universal Relief Team on the first night had distributed hot milk and bread to 2,000 people. And over the next 3 days, hot meals to 20,000 people. All that with $8, 10 kilos of rice, a lot of solidarity and generosity, and grace. Thank you. Namaskar.
Okay, thank you. So that's a classic story of how a disaster facilitated a lot of cooperation and love. We had a somewhat similar situation here in Chennai a few years ago when there was a big hurricane and a lot of flooding. A number of people found it very meaningful to help during that time.
For the Filipinos, it happened all the time. For me, from the United States, it blew my mind.
How many years ago was this?
1985.
So
that's a while back.
Uh-huh. Oh, so you were visiting the Philippines at that time?
I was living there 10 years doing this work.
Uh-huh.
But it was one of my first big disasters to be helping with. And it taught me a lot.
It's a shame that it sometimes requires a disaster to bring this out in people. Anybody, any thoughts about the story, about the way Dada told it, anything? Renu?
Hear me?
Yes, a little faint.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. What I wanted to share was that I think it just takes one kind person and then it has a cascading effect. I think one person decided to help with just 2 cans of milk and a little bit of ginger root. I think that sort of set off the kindness from all the other people. And finally, you were able to tide over those 3 days helping those people. I think that happens all over the world. So it takes just 2 hands to clap, right? And then everybody follows suit. I think it was very, very good, very nice of that person who you went with. I mean, I'm sure he didn't think he could make much of a difference, but it did. That's what humanity is all about. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're right.
Yeah, well, it might begin with one person, but then it's sort of contagious. Nina?
I want to thank you so much for that story. I was on the edge of my seat. I felt it was very captivating. I loved the visuals. I loved the pace of the story because it gave me time to take it all in. And I didn't find I had a lot of questions about things that weren't in the story. And it just made me feel so good and gave me hope and gave me a glimpse of another part of the world, and how people live and how people thrive and how people rise to the occasion. So thank you so much, Dada, for sharing that fabulous story.
Thank you. Alistair has your hand up. You're muted, Alistair. You're muted.
Thank you for that wonderful story. I too was captivated And I just loved the scale of the story, how it just kept expanding from a fixed point, from your first thought, what can we do with disaster relief? And it reminded me of when I was living in Manhattan during 9/11, and it pales in comparison, but it's just a gesture. And my wife and I baked cake, and we stood on the West Side Highway as the NYFD firefighters changed their shifts as they went down to put out the smoldering rubble of the Twin Towers that burned for about 6 months. And we would stand there and just hand out cake. And they were just so overwhelmed by that gesture. I'll never forget it. But your story was magnificent, and thank you so much.
Thank you for that, for what you did.
Yes, I was also in New York during that 9/11 situation. Actually, I was teaching a class that morning at Fordham University at Lincoln Center. And as soon as class ended, all the students were on their mobile phones and they knew about it. And there were beautiful shrines around Lower Manhattan where I lived. And a lot of people volunteered to help clear the rubble, and a lot of them got sick from it, actually. But the difference in that situation from the fire that Dada you described is that from the beginning, 9/11, there were certain questionable elements of it. The way the third building went down, World Trade Center 7, it went down like it looked like a controlled demolition. And so from the beginning, there was doubt about who really did it. And there still is among certain circles that I'm in. So it's hard to heal and, come together as a community when you don't know, actually how and why the damage was done. Of course, on the human level, we have to love and support each other regardless. But if there's doubt about the whole situation, that does kind of put a damper on the healing and community process. Was there any idea about how that fire began, or was it just poverty conditions?
People suspected that it was arson, but there was no investigation.
Mm-hmm. I guess really we're talking about two different processes. One is mourning those who've passed and helping those who've survived. And then the other part is thinking about the whys and the wherefores.
The wonderful thing about the fire was nobody was hurt.
Oh, really?
It was very unusual. 50,000 people lost their homes, but they all managed to run out before the fire swept through.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Thoughts? Finally, I ask, and I recommend this question. What has crossed your mind in the last 10, 15 minutes as you were listening? Doesn't have to be a question, doesn't have to be a comment, just you can share what crossed your mind. Now, of course, we can't talk about a good deal of what passes our mind because it's too private and embarrassing. But there may be something that you can share.
Can I say something?
Yes, Pramila, go ahead. Your camera is off, but you're welcome to make a.
Okay, I'll turn it on.
Okay, it's okay. You can keep your camera off as you like.
Yeah. So I think it's because of my basic nature and kind of background. I thought I saw a divine's hand in their spirit. I mean, because they wanted to serve selflessly, the divine arranged for everything. People came and they contributed, they helped, because some religions and also the kind of spiritual background I had, that it's divine in my heart that connects to divine in your heart. And if our intentions are clear, we get together and work for a cause which is actually a service to the divine. That's what I thought.
Thank you. I very much agree.
And for those of us who are atheists or rationalists, as we call it in India, you know, the divine on one level is about our ideals. You know, the most wonderful ideas and things that we can imagine. So so even if we don't have a sense of divinity, we can still we take the divine can be taken as a symbol, as poetry for the, you know, for the best in us.
Yes.
Okay, well, shall we go on to the next story and storyteller? Very good. Okay, Dada, thank you very much. That was a great kickoff to the season.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, Nina, are you ready?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nina Lesiga.
Hold
From
on, let me
Connecticut.
say a few words before you begin.
Oh, sure.
For people who've just come in, I'm leaving it in gallery view for all of you, but you have the option of magnifying the speaker's image either by choosing speaker view or pinning the person's image. For the storyteller, I recommend, if you can, you know, Zoom allows us now to drag people's images around the screen. If you click on someone's image, everybody, you can try this. If you click on someone's image and keep on my computer, it's a left key of the mouse. You press it and you can move people's image around. Does that work for people? Nina, you can't do it?
No.
Oh,
So
maybe you have an older version of Zoom. But
Okay.
for those who can do it, what I recommend is if you're telling a story, see who's really a good listener and drag their image top row center. That's like front row center in a theater, so that you can look at that person's image right under the camera. As we all know, one of the challenges with video conferencing is that it is so much more satisfying for the viewers to have a sense of eye contact with us. But for us to give the sense of eye contact, we have to look into the camera, which means we cannot look at the people we're talking to. So we make a compromise between looking at the camera and then looking down. Usually the camera is above people's images. So we make a compromise between looking at the camera and then with peripheral vision, looking down at people's images. But for those who can, it's an interesting idea to drag a person who seems to be a very good listener to top row center. But okay, Nina, you can't do that. But so are you seeing gallery view? Whoops, you've muted yourself. You got to turn your mic back on.
I'm on speaker view.
With yourself. Okay, and then when I speak, my image
This
gets...
way, it helps me see my actions in the frame.
Okay, and above speaker view, you can see our image is small, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So if you want to see our physical visual feedback, you can look at those boxes above. Yeah, some people don't like speaker view because they get kind of overwhelmed by seeing their own image. But if it doesn't bother you, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to pin you, so at least for me, your image is large. And Yes, now Nina, please, I apologize for interrupting before, but now please introduce yourself and the story. Maybe say the title of the story. And then please tell us a story.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Nina Lesiga. I live in Connecticut, which is 75 miles northeast of New York City. I moved here 20 years ago for a job relocation. I was a corporate chemist, and surprisingly enough, some of my job involved narrative and storytelling, though we didn't call it that. This is a new story. It's called Uncommon Rescue. I just recently crafted it and did it a little bit differently, where normally I write down stories that I'm going to tell. This one is totally in my mind, and part of the purpose of doing that was to make it more non-scripted, more natural. And because it's in the early development stage, it's on the shorter side. And so as I'm telling it, if you feel that there are details that you'd really love to hear, I would love to hear that from you. I I actually crafted this for a moth storytelling workshops, and that's the reason why it's a shorter version. Well, here we go. It's September 2023, and I'm about to take a swim in my backyard pool. I live in Connecticut, in the United States, and I'm walking down the steps into this rectangular in-ground pool, and I'm missing my sister. You see, she used to always come up on the weekends from New York City, and we would have pool parties. But she got sick and she didn't make it. So, one thing I have to tell you about fall in Connecticut, there are a lot of bugs. There are hundreds and hundreds of bugs on the surface of my pool. And we're talking, yes, beetles and ladybugs and flying ants and other things I don't even know what they are. And so, in order for me to swim, I purchased a pool skimmer. So it's this stick with a screen, flat screen, and I actually go across the surface of the pool where I can stand, and I rescue as many insects as I can. When I am satisfied, I put it to the side and begin my swim. Now, today I am running late. I normally take 60 minutes to swim, but I only have 50, so I need to get started. And it's always a struggle for me because I can't save all the insects because they land, as I'm swimming. So I practice the 80-20 rule, saying I will be satisfied if I capture 80% of them. And I begin to swim. And I'm doing this for exercise. I'm doing this for good health. I'm doing this because I'm about to have knee surgery and I want my body to be as strong as possible. And so I begin to do what is my version of a lap of the pool. And I am not a professional swimmer. We're talking doggy paddles, and my head is above the water because I don't want to get all my hair wet. And I'm swimming back and forth and back and forth. And I'm breathing and I'm relaxing and I'm looking around and I'm enjoying the quiet. Connecticut is so much more quiet than New York City. I would never put a radio on in my backyard. I just want to hear nature. And before I know it, I see something quite large floating a distance away from me. And so I quickly swim over and I see it is a moth. And this moth is spread out and face down on the water. And I am worried because moths had the worst survival rate of any insects in my pool because they're fragile, the wings. And so I am in the deep section. I am nowhere near my pool skimmer. So I do the best I can and I cup my hand and I get the moth in my hand, and then I vigorously swim to the edge of the pool so I can put the moth down. So I turn my hand over, and the moth goes out of my hand and gets plastered to the side of the cement rim of the pool. And I am so upset. It's like, oh my gosh, I have not helped it. I've actually possibly harmed it. This moth is beautiful. You see, when I swim, I wear sunglasses, and they are progressive lenses. So the bottoms of the sunglasses actually magnify the moth, and it's brown and it's orange. I can see the antenna. I can see the wings. I am hoping it can do okay. And I start to talk to the moth. I do that to the birds and the squirrels in my backyard all the time. Don't worry. You can do this. I'm here. I'm a little late for work, but I'm not going to leave you on the side of the pool. And then I see the moth begin to raise one wing. And I am thrilled. And so I look on the side of my pool and I grab a stick. No, it's not really a stick. It's a dandelion stem with all the white poofy stuff is not on the stick anymore. And I offer it to the moth. Hi, how about this? Come on off the pool's edge. Come on the stick. To my amazement, the moth jumps on the stick. That's it. That's great. And a moment later, the moth jumps onto my arm. Oh no, don't do this. My arm is wet. You need to be somewhere where you're dry. And so along the edge of my pool is a slight lip where you can tiptoe. And so I hold onto the edge of the pool with one hand. I have the moth on my arm and I slowly tiptoe down the edge of the pool so I can get into the shallow area so that I can better manage the moth. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never had a moth land on me. Now, I've been to butterfly gardens, and every so often a butterfly will land on your body, but this is a moth. So I get to the shallow end of the pool and I take a leaf. Now, there's a lot of leaves around my pool. It's Connecticut and it's the fall, and the trees are shedding their leaves. And I offer the leaf to the moth, and the moth jumps on. Great. Now, as I said, it's already 5 minutes. I'm kind of late, but I'm in here for you. Keep going. You're doing great. And then the moth jumps on my watch. Oh, hi. Nice for you to visit me again. And it starts to crawl up my arm. And I'm getting worried because, like, what if this moth, reaches my neck? And all of a sudden, it jumps to the side of the pool, and both its wings begin to move. Oh, that's more like it. That's it. That's a great place to be. There's a little breeze coming right now, and it's going to dry you out really well. And then the moth lifts its wings and flies away. Now, moth symbolizes all kinds of things depending on your belief system. And I know I'm about to go under change. And is it a kind of a messenger? Is it part of the spiritual world? I don't know, but I just spent 15 minutes with a moth in my pool that visited me like a friend. It was time to leave the pool. I have to get ready for work. I slowly walk and I'm thinking, And as I get to the staircase leading out of the pool, the thought comes to my mind that that moth may have been my sister. See, we were just 14 months apart. We were very close. We spent a lot of time in the pool, and this is a challenging part of my life. And I feel such comfort, and I feel such serenity, and I feel pure. And I go into my house. I have slider doors on a deck that leads into my kitchen. And I'm trying to come up with every possible reason why that could not be my sister. But I realize in the past, I have had visits from people who are no longer with us, not in the shape of animals in any way. And I couldn't come up with one reason. And it's not just me. I've had people taking care of my house and reported back to me there were unusual things going on. In that moment, I realized that I need to be more open to the other, and that I need to be more aware of what's going on. That moth, I believe till this day, was my sister. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's a very beautiful story.
Thank you, Eric.
Alistair? You got to turn your mic on, Alistair.
I just wanted to say thank you, Nina. You know, the recognition of other realms for us humans can be a scary process. But I really do believe that it is possible to communicate with insects. This morning, there was a small fly that landed on me as I was doing my yoga, and he seemed very comfortable to be there, and I didn't bother him. So he had a free ride. But I just wanted to say that what was occurring for me as you told that story is that the moth, as you described it, grew bigger and bigger in my imagination. And I wasn't surprised when you said it was your sister, because it seemed to be as large as a human person by the time you got to that part of the story. So I don't know if that happened for anyone else, but it did for me. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Alistair.
Renu?
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Nina, I just loved your story because you see, I'm the kind of person who loves all living things. I love animals, and I constantly speak to my dog, my cat, and all little creatures who come into our house. And your story was beautiful because that moth, the way you explained how you described it, and in the end, you said it was your sister trying to communicate with you. Am I right? Yeah, I really loved the story. I loved the way you told it, the pace, everything was beautiful. I was listening so intently because, you know, for me, anyone who loves animals, anyone who appreciates all things in this universe, because we humans think that we are on top of the ecosystem. It's not the truth, because we are all just a part of it. We're only a part, and we are destroying so much of the ecosystem, and animals are suffering because of us. So I thought the story is extremely heartwarming. Just wanted to thank you for sharing it. So thank you.
Here in India, there's a belief that crows are our deceased ancestors. So people are always leaving water and food out for crows. And even the watchmen in our apartment building, they leave food out for the mice. I don't know if they also feel related to the mice, but there's a sort of family feeling.
Up north, there's a temple for rats, Eric.
Yes, I know.
Eat the
I've
milk.
been also.
Yes,
Yes,
they
yes, yes.
worshipped.
Hmm. Well, this is called animism. When we feel that not only animals, but all of the universe is animated by by something, by energy, by spirit of some sort. Hmm.
Is there any a detail that people feel that they would like to know in the story? Because I'm looking to expand it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was very effective the way at first you just told us about your experience with this moth, and you know, it seemed you were being especially, you know, concerned and loving with this moth. So it seemed you were getting you know, if you had to get to work, maybe you were getting distracted from that by getting involved with the moth. But it was very touching that you were so concerned with the moth. And then you brought in this thing about how you felt the moth was somehow related to the memory of your sister.
Okay, thank you. And we have Nancy has her hand raised.
Mm-hmm. Nancy?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind hearing about what other going ons that other people have told you when they were taking care of your house.
Okay.
Well, so Nina, is that what sometimes people refer to as ghosts?
I don't know. I think what happened was a workman was in my house. I was in the hospital for a week, and so he was in there doing maintenance work in the house, and he said he heard voices. And they weren't from the outside, they were like in the next room. And recently, he says it's happened more than once. And I think the biggest opening in my mind is actually after my grandmother died, and this was many years ago in Brooklyn, New York, where she actually showed herself very briefly. And her message to me is everything is going to be okay.
Hmm.
And I think the memory, and I mean, was a big believer of people coming back to visiting me. So I felt like it was my sister coming back in her way to say everything is going to be okay.
Good. There's a tradition, many traditions, that if a person does die young or suddenly or violently, you know, so their life is not complete, that those are the figures who are most likely to appear in the minds of the survivors.
Yeah,
When I was,
yeah.
so I don't know, 40, 50 years ago, I had a sister who was a year and a half older than me who passed away. And I haven't really seen her in nature, but I certainly talk with her, my memory of her on a daily basis.
What I didn't say about the voices I perceived it was members of my family, though it could be previous occupants of the house. But I've just said that was typical that I have pets and they love animals, and I think they were in the house watching after my pets while I was not there. I know
Mhm.
that's my that's my feeling, my intuition.
Mhm.
What are you eating?
I didn't hear you.
Mr. Rao, were you speaking?
Good evening.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, ma'am, the story was very nice. You're remembering your mother, I mean, sister, and the animals, love to the animals. There is an organization called PET Pet. People donate money to the survival. And second thing, Eric was telling about the rats and the story of mice. There is located in Rajasthan. There is a temple. After feeding them, whatever they left over, they eat as a prasadam. That will not give any disease or anything. That much belief they have. Second thing, recently an elephant saved the baby cub from the railway accident, and it lost its life, but the baby was saved. Not only human beings, animals also save their fellow beings. So that's how we should love every animal, every creature in the life world. Thank you so much for sharing a nice story.
Thank you for commenting.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a very thoughtful story, a thought-inspiring story. All right, Padma, are you ready? Great, you have to turn your mic on.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you, and I'm gonna pin you. And you can either stay in gallery view or if you want to enlarge your image as you like.
How would I do? Like, I want to say,
Are you in gallery view now?
yes,
What would you would like to enlarge your image?
yes.
Okay, one way to do that is on the upper right corner of your picture, there's some little icon. Is
Yeah, little
Yeah.
dots, 3 dots.
Yeah, click on those dots and go down to pin. I think you can pin yourself.
Yeah.
Is that done it?
Yeah.
And our images are in little squares above your, that's good, that's good. In the recording,
So I do look at the camera, or can I look at myself and talk?
Number one, look at the camera. Number two, look at the small images of us under the camera. Number three, look at yourself.
Okay.
You know
Right.
what you look like. I wouldn't recommend looking at yourself too much. Try to try to keep an eye on how we're responding to what you're doing. Okay, so
Right.
please introduce yourself and please tell us the title of your story. And
So
yeah, go ahead.
good evening, everyone. My name is Padma, and my title of the story is The Camel Rider. So it is a Middle Eastern folk tale. So it brings me great joy to share because it focuses on human values. So the story that I'm about to share with you was told by Ino Sorsi, and it focuses on what happens when you fail to recognize in others the same hopes, dreams, and aspirations that you have. You know, when you draw a line between yourself and someone else. And that's very important to embrace another fellow human being. So on this, because all of us are unique. We are all unique in some way, but fundamentally, we are all battling with love, hate, death, separation, anxiety, fear, and whatnot, aren't we? So on that note, let me start with a story, but I want to hear that do all of you agree with me that we are all fighting with that emotions fundamentally?
Yes, we agree.
Yes, so good to hear that. So over here, you could just leave out everything that's happening outside, and in this moment, I am reflecting you and you are reflecting me. So we are going to, swim in this wellspring of humanity and wellness. Thank you. And here's my story. So there was a camel rider who was leading his caravan of camels from his town through a small village on his way to Baghdad to sell. While he made his way through the small village, he spotted a walled orchard. How does he know it's a walled orchard? Because hanging over the wall of an orchard, branch of a tree, and hanging from that tree were 3 juicy, succulent peaches. You could taste them as well. So when he made his way through this orchard, a thought crossed his mind, and he felt, wow, look at that. Some people are so lucky. They don't have to move around from place to place. They can earn their own living staying at one place. And They can spend their time in the comfort of their home and for days together. They don't have to go through this hot desert soil for days upon days upon days without the comfort of a home and a loving wife. Just as he was thinking about all this, the camel had led his way to those juicy peaches. He stretched out his neck and he consumed those juicy peaches. The orchard owner, seeing this, was so furious, he took a stone and hurled it at the camel. It hit the camel on its forehead and it dropped down dead. The camel rider, when he saw his camel dead, his best camel, he was overcome with rage and he just picked up a stone and hurled it at the camel, at the orchard owner. The orchard owner tried to evade it, but he was not too fast. It hit him at the temple and he dropped down dead. Now, a dead camel is one thing, but a dead man is something entirely different. And this man was very scared and he was hoping and turning around to check if he was not being spotted by anyone. He quietly took out a knife and cut the rope that connected the first camel to the second and began to lead his caravan away. But as ill luck would have it, he was spotted by the sons of the orchard owner, who ran through the orchard behind him, calling on, "Murderer, murderer, you killed our father, stop there." And they grabbed him by his collar. The camel rider was overcome with fear. He was stunned and he froze and he just knelt down and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. I didn't mean to kill your father, but look." And he produced a bag full of gold. "I have blood money, which I'm willing to offer and pay for the life of your father." "Blood money? We don't want your blood money. We want your life. Never again are we going to experience sitting in the cafe, drinking hot, warm coffee with our father and playing backgammon. Never again are we going to harvest peaches and take it to the market to sell with our father because of you. We don't want your blood money. We want your life." And die. They grabbed him by his shirt and took them to the judge. By now, a big crowd had gathered there and they inquired, "What's the matter? What's going on?" And one of the sons says, "We are taking him to the judge," and they explained why. Very soon they were at the gates of the judge, just home, who stepped out to ask, "What's the matter? How may I help you? What's happening here?" "This man here, he's killed our father. We want his life." "Huh? He's killed our father," said one of the orchard owner's sons. "Wait," said the judge, and he turns to the camel rider and says, "My dear friend, you seem to have offended this man. You have killed your father. Is there anything that you can say?" So the camel rider says, "I'm very sorry, Your Honor. It was by mistake. I didn't mean to kill your father. Oh, it was a reflex action. He killed my camel and I threw a stone and he dropped down dead. And I'm very sorry. I repent for it. And I'm willing to pay for the life of their father," he said, and offered out the gold. "Wait," said the judge, and he turned to the orchard owner's sons. "This man didn't mean to kill your father, but he repents for his action and is willing to pay for the life of your father. Would you accept his blood money?" No, blood money? We don't want any blood money. We don't want blood money. We want his life, a life for a life, death for a death. We want him to die and die right now," said one of the orchard owner's sons. So the judge was helpless and he turned to the camel rider and says, "My dear friend, you seem to have offended this man. You have killed their father and they have every right to ask." Saying this, he snapped his fingers and out came the executioner, laid out his sheepskin rug with the scimitar sharpened to perfection. He said, "My dear friend, kneel down, say your prayers, make peace with your creator, be prepared to meet him, be prepared to die." Now, the camel rider's stomach churned and churned, but he had no choice. He dropped himself down to the ground and he turned to the angel on his right and he turned to the angel on his left. He turned to the angel on his right and said, "Wait, I'm a condemned man, ain't I?" he asked the judge. "Yes, you are," said the judge. "And a condemned man has a last request, does he not?" "He does," said the judge. "Then allow me to go home for 3 days and 3 nights, and I promise to return on the 4th morning." What an unorthodox request, said the judge. Never have I heard a condemned man asking to go home, and why should I believe you? Because I said I will return, said the camel rider. Well, I cannot let that happen. But if one of these good men gathered here is willing to take your place for 3 days and 3 nights, and if you return with a set time, you can get to go home. Ask, said the judge. Well, then the camel rider stood up and requested to the gathering there, asking, if any of you are willing to take my place for the 3 days and 3 nights, I promise to return. Murderer, you come into our place, you kill one of a man, now you want to go home and you want one of us to take your place, huh? No, die, said one of them. That's your fate, said the another. But amidst this commotion, right from behind the corner of the crowd, I'm willing to take his place, said one voice. And everybody swung around to see who it was. It was an old man with the long gray hairs and long gray beard. He was elbowing his way throughout the crowd, and everybody tried to stop him. Hey, stop, old man. What's wrong with you? Why you don't owe his life? What are you trying to do? Stop there. And the old man said, I know what I'm doing. And he quietly walked and reached the judge. When he reached the judge, he said, I am willing to take his place, Your Honor. The judge asked, are you sure? And do you know that if this man does not return, your life will be forfeit? Yes, I'm aware and I'm most willing, said the old man. Well, then it's settled. And then the camel rider is given one of his best camels. He mounts on it and rides fast to meet the people of his village and his family. This poor old man is handcuffed and taken down to the dungeons. The crowd shakes his head and disperses with the thought that poor old man, he doesn't know what he's doing. I don't think he's going to see the light of the day anymore. And he's giving his life for nothing. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, 3 days passed. And on the 4th morning, this old man was pulled out from the dungeons and taken to the execution ground. The word spread far and wide, and the crowds had gathered from thither and yon to know the fate of this old, helpless man. The judge said, old man, I'm very sorry you've placed your trust on the wrong man, and he didn't seem to return. So you have to fill in for him. So with all his heart, the old man said, yes, I'm willing to do that. And again he snapped. Out came the executioner with his scimitar. He laid out his sheepskin rug and said again, my dear friend, prepare to die and make peace with your creator. The old man knelt down. He began to say his prayers, and just as he was saying, the entire life flashed through him. He thought about all the good deeds. He thought about all the bad deeds. He thought about all the way he was helpful to people and all the way he was mean to people. But his good deeds weighed higher than his bad deeds, and he felt satisfied. He opened his eyes. He turned to the executioner to his right, and he said, listen, strike hard and true. I want to die instantly and not experience pain. The executioner placed the scimitar on his neck, and he raised it high, and he was about to strike when someone from the crowd said, stop. And there, at a distance, somebody could spot a big cloud of dust being worked out. And one of the men was riding furiously on the camel. His face was covered from the dirt and dust of the desert. He rode through the crowd, jumped out from the camel, and he ran to the old man, picked him from his elbow and put him aside. And he said, I'm sorry, old man. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to cause you any distress. And he revealed his face. The camel rider is back. Can you believe it? The camel rider is back. I wouldn't come back. The camel rider is back. By then, the camel rider says, I'm sorry, old man. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm willing to take your place, and now you're free to go. Wait, said the judge. What's happening? Why did you come back, and why did you leave the place with your promise? So the camel rider now says, well, judge, in my place at my hometown, there was an old woman who had entrusted her jewels to me. Had I died here that day, nobody would have been able to replace her jewels, and nobody would have known where it was, and I would have been called as a thief. My sons would have been called as a thief. My family for 7 generations would be called as thief. No, I couldn't have it. So I went there, I returned her jewels, and I gave a final goodbye to my family. My young son was devastated to know that I would not return. He clung to me. I had to sing to him, tell stories to him, put him to sleep. And when he was fast asleep, I took a final goodbye of my wife. I mounted on the camel and rode as fast as I could to get here. But now that's okay. I'm willing to die and take my place, saying that he knelt down. Wait, said the judge. And he turned to the old man to ask, old man, why were you willing to take his place and prepare to give your life up? Well, said the old man, I was raised at a time when people believed that a man's word meant his honor. When a man promised, it means everything. It means he does and he means it. So I chose to believe him. But however, if he did not return, I would rather die than live in a world where what I learned means nothing. Impressive, said the judge. Well, I was taught that without compassion and mercy, there could be no justice. And so today, I decide that no blood shall spill and no heads will roll. And he called out to the orchard owner's son and said, listen, will you accept the blood money for the life of your father? And they magnanimously nodded their head. Well then, said the judge, let's get into the house and drink pomegranate wine, weigh the gold, and talk about life. And that, my dear friends, is the end of my story. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. A great story. Well, tell us, Padma, what did, in your words, what really attracted you to this story? What's the meaning that you get out of it?
See, actually, what really attracted to me is that the very word that old man said, man's word means everything. That was a personal connect to me. And of course, now we are living in a world where, they just take things for granted. So I feel that, this has to be retold again for the younger generations and the adult, where a man was willing to give the life. He felt that the man's word, and he chose to believe a stranger. So that really drew me towards the story.
Mm-hmm. Great. Renu?
Padma, you really blew me away. I was completely riveted by your story.
Thank
The
you.
expressions, the pace, everything was really, really good. And I completely enjoyed the story. Very well done. So congratulations.
Thank you, Renu.
Thank you for sharing the story.
Anybody else? Nina, go ahead.
I loved your energy and animation as you told this story. I loved the dialogue. I loved the visuals. I think kudos to you. You packed in so much storyline in a very short period of time, which I could not do. So I admire you for that. And I liked how you felt relaxed. You look calm as you told and very confident. Thank you for, I've never heard that story before. Thank you for sharing it. And sorry, I don't know if you hear my cat meowing in the background. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nina.
Tracy? You got to turn your, yes, go ahead.
Hello, Padma. I came in halfway through your story and I apologize for that. And still, I just want to say thank you. There's something about the conciseness of your language, which just, dropped me right into the story, right into the imagery. And the one that really resonates was the scythe as sharpened to perfection. Like that really just brought me right there. And yeah, beautiful telling. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Alistair has his hand raised.
Oh, Alistair, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I cannot, just a minute, I'll just unpin myself. I cannot see the speaker. How would I do that, Eric?
How do you?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alistair.
Hi, Padma. Thank you so much for that wonderful story. It was very
Thank you.
moving on a heart level because in the end, the words of the wise man and, of course, the camel driver changed the hearts of the sons of the man who died.
Yes.
And it reminds me, and I think all of us, that words have the power to change our hearts, to transform us. And particularly the wisdom of the old man struck me because I think we sell our seniors short in terms of valuing their wisdom. We often consign them to, residences where they face a death sentence because they don't feel valued for their wisdom. And I think that this is something that we need to change as a society, to have more compassion for their lives lived and for their wisdom that can change our hearts in our lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alistair. And I think I should thank you because I had you were responding and I kept looking at you and it kept motivating me to tell further. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you, Padma. Now, Tracy, I want to thank you for coming in when you've come. But the person before you is Raji, and it seemed for a while, Raji, that you would not be able to connect because you had a power cut because you have a thunderstorm. But now it seems you have your power back.
Yes, Eric. Just now it's come back. Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so Tracy, I'm hoping you can stay with us a little longer. Good. Okay, so Raji,
I'm taking it on my phone. Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. But if you can stabilize your phone somehow, if you can put it on a table or a chair, so you don't have to hold it and so it doesn't move. Can you do that on a pile of books or something?
I can hold it. Keep it this way. Yes, for now.
Can you stabilize it?
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, and can you tilt it down a little bit because your face is at the very bottom?
Is it okay now? Yeah.
Can you tilt the phone a little bit so that your image is a little higher up? No, yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, that's a little bit, then now it's cutting off the top of your head. I know it's hard to, you don't have a full tripod there, but okay, good. All right, so Raji, please tell us is the name of your story The Space Station?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, well.
Hello, listeners. I thank all of you for having come here. Hope you all agree when I say, if there are no listeners, there are no storytellers. Thank you, Eric, for giving me this.
Yeah, so go ahead, please introduce yourself and please tell us the story.
The story is about a space station. India's space program is one of the best in the world, with Chandrayaan-3 landing on the south pole of the moon. We are able to discover more particles about the moon, the lunar eclipse, and much more. Space has been our interest since the time of Aryabhata, venturing into space since long time. Though we have 4 other competitors like US, the Russia, and as well France. And we know it's a bipolar world, but still India, which was rated to be a third world country, now is competing into the space war with other very well-developed countries like USA and Russia. Our latest program with NASA, which is called NISAR, and ISRO, they are discovering and working on radar satellites, which can tell us more about the Earth's crust. Maybe we would soon have a system which could detect and also envelop us more about why earthquakes do happen, how we can actually detect and how we can actually prevent them over our space system. And other satellites also give us an opening to this, and so we can avoid the natural disasters, at least to a certain extent, and take some steps before we go to a very bad state. Yes. It was in 1947, like all of us know, we got our independence and we got freedom, liberty, as well as also a republic. But at the same time, India's space program has begun. It was a renaissance era for Indians because it was through our space programs that we could come out of poverty or unemployment or hunger state. Everything improved and we're far more developed to what we are today. It was Mr. Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, under the leadership of Nehru, who said, we are going to change our country and make it to be a growth-oriented and a justice-oriented economy, as well as a social system and a political system that could address all our problems which we were facing those days. Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, who was a physicist and who was a Cambridge graduate, he, under the leadership of Nehru, said, we need a very strong space program, because with space program and the satellites, maybe we could educate our masses. Our 6 lakh villages, along with electricity, need something more audio-visual program that could change, and we could become more literate and information-bound individuals across and compete with the world. That's how the Indian National Committee for Space Research began in 1962. And then it was renamed again in 1969 as ISRO. So Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, who was the architect of a space program, went in looking for a very lovely spot wherein we can start a first rocket space program. He went to different places and then he envisioned, it's not enough. I think, he said, it's not enough. I think we should find a place which is very close to the equatorial, Earth's equatorial space, that has different particles which could make a spaceships to move further faster into space and which could be more accurate. So as like all of us know, India is touching the equator very close by in the southern India. He came to Kerala and he found a very small, tiny fishing village called Tumba. He went across, studied the place, and very close to the beach near the water where the Earth's equator was touching, it was a church. And the church was St. Mary Magdalene Church. And you can imagine, religion is so close, religion and faith is so close to every individual. So Vikram Sarabhai went to the father, Reverend Father Urgent Pereira, and said, I think we will need this space of the church to launch a space shuttle. Father was like, how is that possible? And then he said, yes, science does a lot of research to give us truth. I think I can definitely convince all my people who come here, why don't you join us in the Sunday Mass? Maybe let's decide what our space program will have and what fate we will have. So on Sunday morning, along with Abdul Kalam and Vikram Sarabhai, Mr. KGS Murthy, all of the scientists went to attend the Sunday Mass in the morning at 6 o'clock. And then Reverend Father Pereira said, after the Mass was over, he summoned everybody and he said, dear people of the Lord, I think we may have to give up this church for the research of truth. The science gives us truth. And maybe the scientists, we have popular scientists here from the space program who are requesting us to give up this space because it is very close to the Earth's equatorial program. And then all of them were like, they just listened very silently after Father spoke. Then everybody very silently for a moment, Abdul Kalam writes in his Wings of Fire, there was silence. Nil, nothing. Then in just one moment or 1 minute, everybody in the church got up and said, Amen. That's how people agreed. The people of the church who were worshipping here for years together in this old church, they agreed and said, we are okay to give up this church for the benefit of truth, for the research of science, and for India's space program, which today is one of the competitors of the world. That's how Abdul Kalam says it was not a religious thing. It was a thoughtful decision made by everybody who worshipped there. And that's how India built its first spaceship program in Tumba in Kerala, very close to the waters, near the beach, the South India's beach. And then the church was later converted into a trial space where it was a workshop. And then the residence of the father, a very small residential quarters, was connected into Abdul Kalam and Vikram Sarabhai's working space where the study table was held. This is how India gave up their own religious space for the space program, which is today one of the biggest in the world and which is set to be the most popular, and we are leading, I should say. This space program today, Tumba, is being run by 43 countries as a space launch program. 43 countries have used of space, and a space program is one of the most recognized and the most remarkable one that we have today. Mr. Sarabhai, Dr. Sarabhai had a vision. He said, for Indians who have penetrated into the village life, it is very important for us something that could create an audiovisual space for people to know, get information as well as to literate them. He said, I have to do something about this. And then that's how we launched satellites. And that's how our TV came into existence for the rural public of India. And today, where we are, it's all the program of Mr. Dr. Sarabhai, who initiated this program, later Abdul J. Kalam, Mr. U.R. Rao, and also Satish Dhawan, all of them who led ISRO. Today, see where we are. The Chandrayaan-3 has given us space in the space program, and we are soon going to also be on Mars very soon. Those days are very soon coming. Let's all wait for this. Yes, this is how the story goes. And I thought this was a very unique story. So I thought maybe I could throw some light on this, and then we will have a discussion if possible. If anyone have a few doubts, though I'm not a specialist about India's space program, I've just made a little study to tell you all this little story about how we are so different, we are so unique that we are able to sacrifice our own religious spaces for the invent of truth. If anyone has any questions, which I can answer in my own limitations, as a common man and as an amateur storyteller, please let me know. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, thank you. That was wonderful. And it goes well with the story that we just heard before you, because in both stories, people sacrifice their own ego for the sake of higher ideals. I'm from the USA, but I first came to India 35 years ago. And soon after I arrived here, I heard the phrase, the spirit of cooperation. I never heard that in the USA. Tracy, have you ever heard that expression, or Nina in the USA? Or Susan? Are you in Canada?
I feel like I have heard it in ideal circles or structures, but
well,
rarely.
I never heard it in New York, but it is an important concept here in India. And, maybe it's decreasing over time as people become more materialistic, but it's still strong here. The original context I heard it in was, 30 years ago, there were a larger variety of vehicles on the road. There were, a lot of oxen pulling carts and goats and of course people on bikes and
cycles, rocket parts and cycles have been transferred.
That's right, and bicycles. So in order for all of these different types of vehicles on the road people had to be very aware, as people were passing each other and making room for each other to go by. So it required a lot of spirit of cooperation. So your story also illustrates that spirit of cooperation.
Yes, Eric, true.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Go
Your
ahead.
story nice. We heard that the secret of the ISRO. कुछ खोकर पाना है. You have to lose something to get something. So that is the spirit. As Eric said, cooperation, and not only cooperation, you have to lose to get something. You explained very well, narrated very well, so nice. Today, the traffic in the space is also very jam, like in our roads, Chennai roads or Mumbai roads or Hyderabad roads, whatever roads it is. Everything is jam with satellites. So we have to stop for some moment. We have to make it some more productive and naturalistic. Otherwise, we cannot survive anywhere in this world. Population is growing, technology is growing, everywhere the growth is there. Thank you.
Thank you. Alistair.
Thank you so much. Hang on. Thank you so much, Reddy, for your story. I think it's very ironic that the space program would have displaced the church, because so often in our culture we oppose religion and spirituality to scientific discovery, and yet I think that in quantum physics, for example, they're discovering that the mysteries of life are very, very deep. And for example, that perhaps time and space do not exist, and that we are all entangled across time and space in some way. And so my own belief is that our outer journeys into outer space need to be matched by an inner journey that we make into the depths of our soul. And so hopefully, as we move forward, we will be able to balance these two journeys, as of course the aphorism is, as above, so below. And so the more we discover about ourselves, I think the more we'll discover about space. Thank you again, Raji.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, beautifully said, Alistair.
Thank you.
I actually feel that we should date time from when humans first went into space, which was, I think, 1961. The Soviet Union sent a man in a ship which circled the Earth 3 times. That was the first time. Yes.
Yuri Gagarin.
Correct. That was the first time we escaped the bounds of gravity. It's like a baby standing up for the first time. And I feel that that is a collective human achievement, which I feel it's a more reasonable way to date time than the birth of a figure in one particular religion. So according to that system, we're in the year 63 AS, after space.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, Eric, you're right.
Okay. Anybody else? Any thoughts about any of this? All right. Thank you very much, Raji.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much. Okay, Tracy, thank you very much for not minding the slight delay. And there you are in Wisconsin, is that correct?
It is, yes.
It
It's
is.
my pleasure.
So please introduce yourself, and you're going to be telling an ancient Greek story, is that correct?
That is correct.
Please tell us the title and, give us a little introduction to it, and please tell us a story.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Hello, hello, friends all over the world. It's a joy, excuse me, to be here. Just heads up, I have allergies. It's like the beginning of spring coming in, so I do have some coughing. This is probably the earliest I've told a story in a long, long time. And it's just, you know, still morning here. So excuse me for the coughing. I live in Washburn, Wisconsin. It's in northern Wisconsin on the shores of the largest freshwater lake in the world. That lake is called Lake Superior. It is the ceded territories of the Ojibwa peoples, and these peoples are known for their storytelling. These indigenous peoples that this land was originally part of their the warp and weft of their life and their cultural relationship to the land. The story that I'm going to share with you today is an old story. It's an ancient story. It's the story of old Baobo, which of course is also the story of the other two goddesses, Demeter and Persephone from ancient Greece. And the play of this story is known and believed to be part of the Eleusinian mysteries. Perhaps one of the most well-known secret worship rites of passage connected to the cycle of life that folks, humans, you know, bowed to. And we are cyclical beings, and we are often out of our relationship with that cyclical quality to life. And so this is a retelling that is quite well informed by a story that I found in the book Sun Stories by Carolyn McVicker Edwards. And I've been carrying this story for decades. I stepped on the path of storyteller in 1995, and shortly after this story lives in me in an incredibly rich and intimate way. And it's a joy to be able to tell and be with you today. So, are you ready for a story? Are you ready for a story? Yes. Very good. So, bring your hands together, and for a moment, we'll just connect to our bodies, these vessels which make everything possible, and start to rub your hands faster and faster so they warm up, creating some heat in your hands, and faster and faster. And when you feel some heat, pull them apart. Do you feel some vibration, some resonance? Yes, good, good. Bring your hands to your eyes so that you may see this story in the brilliance of your imagination. Bring your hands still humming to your ears so that you may hear this story. Bring your hands to your throat so that perhaps one day you will retell this story. Bring your hands to your heart, another way of seeing and feeling. May you feel this story in your own life. And then last, bring your hands to your belly, connecting you with your grandmother and your mother, so you may remember that this story is a feast, a feast, a feast. Now, once upon a time and once upon a place, there was a mother. There was a mother and there was a daughter. And this sacred relationship, the love of a mother, for the love of a daughter, and the love of a daughter for their mother. There were two goddesses, Demeter and Persephone, and they lived in an eternal, near eternal garden. Why? Why this eternal garden? Because the sun, Helios, the sun, was so enchanted and so drawn to this love between mother and daughter and mother, and the beauty of these goddesses, that the sun could just not bear to step away from their radiance. And so the sun blessed the land with such light, such life, that this garden was an inner and an outer Eden. The blossoms, it was a sensorium of life, of cycles, of growth, the scent of roses and jasmine. Beyond the garden, there were fields and fields of holy wheat. Wheat, which would be ground into flour, which would be baked into bread. Bread, which is life, still to this day. So in this constant and always garden, these two goddesses lived. And it was sweet. You know, that sweetness. Do you remember the sense of sweetness of what it was like when mother was at home? This is literal and this is a metaphor. That sweetness was everywhere. Now, as Persephone grew older and older, always knowing the safety and sweetness of her mother's love, her own natural desire to grow and learn and mature, to find her own interests and be curious, took her a little further and a little farther from her mother's skirts. And she began to explore the world. And she would go beyond the garden. She would go through the fields of life, giving wheat, through the wild, amazing, magnificent forest. And she would have her own experience, precious and singular. And then she would come back bubbling with aliveness to tell her mother. Now, Persephone had never known the word caution, had never felt fear. This was the garden. All was well. So one day, while Demeter kneaded dough, which would become bread, which would feed life, Persephone said, "Mama, I'm going to my secret spot through the forest. There's a pond that I sit at. I'm going and I'll be back soon." And she kissed her mother on the cheek. And Demeter had heard her say she was going to this special place many, many times. And as she kneaded the dough, these words spilled from her lips, unbidden. "Be careful. Be careful." She had never once uttered those words to her daughter. But her daughter didn't hear. She was already lickety-splitting out the door and through the garden on her way to discovery. And so she traveled through the fields, found the path that led her up and around and through that wild tangle of forest. And she greeted the trees, she greeted the birds, as she always did. "Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. Good morning. Good day." And then she came to her spot, her special place, this small pool of water, surrounded by bulrushes and thick with life, humming. Dragonflies and butterflies and fat, lazy bees. Now, some days the wind stirred the pond, and some days the pond was as smooth as glass. And always the beneficent sun, Helios, shone down. Sometimes she would sit at the edge of the pool and she would look in and she would see the reflection of the blue sky, and she would see her reflection, her face, no longer a child's face. Such a discovery, such a discovery. And some days she would sit back against a great slab of granite, warmed by the sun, and she would daydream the dreams of young women who have always dreamed. Now, one day, as the hum of life all around filled her ears, as the smell of blooming rosemary filled her nose, as the taste of bread baked by her mother fed her body, she felt something vibrating in the ground beneath her. And then she heard the sound of something unique, although she'd heard stories. It was the sound of horses running. In this case, one horse and one rider. She had heard about horses. And she looked as she watched this dark horse with the dark rider riding over the field, riding towards her. A visitor to the garden, to this paradise, this idyll. And she was curious, her eyes wide as saucers. And she watched the horse arrive, its nostrils flaring from exertion, and the rider dressed in black dismount. The rider was a man. She had heard about men, but she had never met one. The gods, of course, didn't count. This was a man in a man's form. And he loped towards the pool of water. And Persephone rose from the ground where she had been resting against that slab of great granite. And she felt herself blush a little bit. This man was pleasing to her. And she was curious and coy. And the man leaned in, and she leaned in to listen. Now, back in the garden, Demeter baked the bread. She was humming some song in her head from her own childhood her mother had sung to her, when she heard a sound that turned her blood cold. A scream like lightning bolted in her ears, a scream that could be none other than her daughter. Demeter ran through the palace, ran through the garden, through the fields of wheat, not knowing where she was going, and yet knowing by instinct, by intuition. She followed the path of her daughter up through the forest. And the trees all shivered with wind and worry. And Demeter arrived at that place she'd heard her daughter say and tell of over and over, the pool of water, the bulrushes, the humming of life, the slab of granite, and there was no one there. Persephone, she called. Persephone, my daughter. And she looked, and there in the dirt, she saw scuff marks where some kind of interaction had happened. And there in the dirt, her daughter's slipper, one slipper. Persephone, she called. She ran. She ran mad with uncertainty, with concern down through the forest, calling her daughter's name again and again. She didn't notice as she clutched her daughter's shoe. She didn't notice the trees, the leaves, which had always been the most fecund green, had begun to change, turning yellow and red and brown. And by the time she came down through the forest, she didn't notice the leaves begin to fall away. By the time she reached her own doorstep, she didn't notice that the sun who could not bear to look on Demeter's grief, backed away further and farther. Demeter didn't notice that snow, white flakes of ice, had begun to fall and land on the earth. And the balmy, warm garden became a cold, dying place. Demeter opened her door. She slammed it shut. The snow fell. The ice formed within and without. Silence reigned as all that life, the sensorium of that garden, quieted. Time passed, mythic time passed. A year, 10,000 years, we don't know. But Demeter stayed inside, unable to cry, frozen, her heart shut. And then one day through the feet of snow, a visitor came to her door and knocked. The visitor persisted and knocked until the din brought Demeter to the door, her hair a wild tangle, her eyes closed and shut, her heart hard. She opened the door, ready to throw out some unkindness. What do you want? Who are you? And there, seated in the snow, Fox sat. Copper, golden in that white snow. And Fox said, "Follow me. Perhaps we will find your Persephone." Now, Demeter still had her daughter's one shoe, that slipper, tucked into the pocket of her skirt. And at the mention of her daughter's name, she stumbled out into that blizzardscape of ice and snow and followed the fox through the fields, into another forest, further and farther, ascending and descending, until the fox led her to a hut in the forest. Now, Demeter was too blinded by her grief, her unexpressed grief, too blinded by the cold to notice that For about 2 feet around the perimeter of that hut, there was no snow. And the fox scratched on the door, and they waited. And eventually the door opened the way that all old ancient doors opened, with a great groaning. And there in the door was an old woman. Her hair as white as the snow, wild and unkempt. Her eyes both cloudy but clear, like looking into a starry night. And the lines on her face, each one a good story. Old Baobo had been waiting. Come in, she said. Sit. And in the room, the small room, there was a table and 2 chairs. And old Baobo went to the hearth and brought out a mug of something hot and set it down. Drink. Demeter drank from the mug, and it burned her tongue, and it tasted bitter. But she swallowed it down into her belly, and it burned. It burned, and Demeter reached into her pocket. She pulled out the slipper, and she slammed it on the table. My daughter, she said. And old Baobo put her bony hand on Demeter's back and said, there, my dear, there. And was it that kindness, that willingness to not look away like Helios had done? Or was it the brew that old Baobo gave her? We don't know. But Demeter's tears flowed, bitter then sweet. And as she wept, Demeter became aware of sounds in the room, the crackle of the fire. And she looked and she noticed they were not alone, that there in this little hut in the forest, there was a bear going from side to side, stomping its feet. And there in the other corner was a beaver with a great flat tail that was flapping her tail on the floor. And up along a shelf towards the ceiling, there were 2 chipmunks rolling a pine cone back and forth in play. And Demeter just thought the absurdity of this. What was this? Where was she? And the tears flowed, and the rhythm of these animals grew. And the heat of the fire grew. And then old Baobo, she hiked up her skirt well past her hips, her old body sagging, and she began to sway back and forth in rhythm. In the rhythm of the room, in the rhythm of these animals. It was a dance that no old women do now, I'll tell you that. Unabashed, unashamed, old Baobo swung her hips, her old breasts hanging down by her belly, the belly that had birthed life. And she danced and she called out, And after some time, the heat in the building grew, the rhythm grew stronger, deeper, faster. And then she leaned a hand out to Demeter. And Demeter, unaware, didn't notice that her foot had been tapping on the floor to the rhythm in the room. And she grabbed Balbo's hand and she stood and she danced. And the two women danced for a long time. They were so into their dance. Maybe you've danced like this too. It was a wild dance. It was a holy dance. It was an origin story becoming. And outside the hut, they didn't notice the sound. Drip, drip, drip. The sound of ice melting. They didn't notice buds begin to open. And they didn't know yet that further through the forest, a great mound there in a space, a pond began to thaw. They didn't know yet that that great slab of granite, now warmed by the sun, Helios, who had heard the women dancing and saw them moving and was curious and came forward closer, closer. As that granite slab opened, and from the crack, a pale white arm connected to a young woman's body who knew the call of the underworld emerged. And spring was born and life renewed. And soon, Demeter and Persephone would reunite. Their love deeper and wider, their journey powerful. And that's where the story ends today. That's it. The beginning. Thank you for your listening, for your journeying, cycling through generation, degeneration, and regeneration. This is who we are. This is what we are of. Any questions? Any questions? What's present for you? And if you like, what I usually do when I tell a story is to just offer praise to the story that has no author. It has just been told and told. These are myths. There is no author. And the way that I offer praise to a story is to be with the images, not the words, the images, because these stories are images well before they were words surely written on a page. And if anyone wants to share an image that just startles you or charms you or troubles you, this is an offering to the story. This ancient story, much older than us.
Well, I feel the ice melting and the land thawing. And my storytelling teacher, Laura Sims, likes to say that storytelling in general is a ritual.
Yeah.
But that story especially is a ritual. And you led us through it beautifully.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
That story has a very special place in the history of feminism and the history of the storytelling revival, which both of which flowered in the early 70s, about 50 years ago. And as you know, Tracy, many women storytellers who were facilitating the global revival of storytelling adapted and adapted stories of ancient goddesses, especially this story. Laura Sims has been telling this story interspersed with her own experiences and folk tales from different cultures for 40 years. So it's really an essential story of the feminist movement, which I like to feel I'm a member of, and it was wonderful to hear it again. It's and this theme of all nature being alive, and we had it in our first story today, where a woman, I guess I'm not sure if she's here anymore. She told about how a moth seemed to be her sister who had passed away. So this theme of, and it's been in other stories too, this theme of nature being imbued and permeated with spirit. It's okay, you can say it's a fantasy, but it's more than that. It's it represents some sort of truth.
I agree, Eric. That's my experience. Absolutely. These stories are, and the practice of storytelling is a sacred act, is a rite in itself. And it's not every storyteller engages in that way, but yet just the act of being present to story, and story as something animate and alive as well. That's not just wholly belonging to it's of humanity, but yet it's more than our humanness in some ways.
That story is associated with, as you mentioned, the Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece, which seems were a series of rituals, especially for women. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. And what's known about them is kind of mysterious because of course they're super ancient, and yeah, women have been celebrating their relationship to being cyclical beings, right? We bleed, we create life. I mean, this is often not talked about in conversation, and yet it's what we do and what we hold, and that in itself is a mystery to celebrate and honor.
It burst upon the scene in the 60s and the 70s. Terence McKenna wrote about the archaic revival. And I'll just mention a few books that were so important to me in the early 70s when I was a teenager. When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone, which sought to document through looking at ancient sculptures the suppression of matriarchy and goddess worship as male-dominated society and mythologies ascended. Then Drawing Down the Moon by Margot Adler was a wonderful book about how women, especially, were creating these rituals in relation to this material, and getting connected with nature and the universe through these rituals that they were either discovering or creating. It doesn't matter. So I'm so grateful to you for blessing our first session of the season with this story.
Thank you. I am so honored. What a joy for me to join you today and all over the world, right? In various stages of life and degeneration, right? The Northern Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere, we're all in different places celebrating what is all around us. So such an honor. Thank you very much, Eric. And thank you everyone who joined and listening. And I see there's some questions.
Yes, Rena, go ahead. You got to turn.
Rena, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay. No, it was beautifully told. It was so dramatic and so visual. It was, and I liked, and your pacing was, all of that was very, very very professional. What can I say? It was very, very good.
Thank you.
I'm just very curious about this version of the story because when I learned about Demeter and Persephone, it was a very, very different version with going down Hades abducting her, and that it was the mother who decided that until her daughter came back, nothing would grow. That she had that power. It didn't just happen, out of a kind of sympathy for her, but she's the one who made it happen. And until Zeus intervened,
Right.
and made this pact with Hades that Persephone would come back for 6 months of the year, and 6 months she would be with him. So this thing, and I think it was another goddess who told her about it, but this was such a different take on the story. The elements were the same, but where does that come from, that version?
Well, the version that, like I said, the retelling, it's a beautiful book, a book that every story should have in their library, I believe. Sun Stories by Carolyn McVicker Edwards. And if you look and you start to talk about what's interesting is I'm very familiar with the version that you've just shared, right? The variation. And if you look and you explore Baobo, there are some books, there's research about Baobo, but this old woman has been kind of forgotten. But the old woman, now there's a whole nother thing to explore in the world of civilization and modernity, However, old Baobo, who could be related to like the Celtic Sheila na gig, is in this, and this is really about old Baobo doing this erotic dance, really, that draws Helios back. And so then spring is happening, and yeah, so it's a retelling, and after many years of courting and this deep intimacy I've had with the story from other sources and readings and tellings. Yeah, what I love about it is just the agency of it. And it's still intense. There's still an abduction. And I love that we get to have the crone, the hag, right, to be present as an agent of creation, rather than something, discarded or invisible, which is often the case, unfortunately, in modernity, at least in this part of the world.
Well, like any ancient myth, there are many versions of it.
Yes.
Many variations of who actually abducts her and his relationship to Zeus and so forth. But that story, as I say, it's been a centerpiece of the feminist movement, and people like Starhawk and other ritual leaders over the years. I'm just visualizing 50, 100 women listening to that story and acting it out, dancing it out in a spiral, as Starhawk or somebody would tell it. It's a very strong ritual story, especially for women and us men too. Alistair?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Eric. I want to just put a pin there. So it's not just a sideline, what you just said. This is especially important for male identifying folks, right? As they explore and can bear witness and hold space for this ancient story and what it might mean to them. And I can't begin to imagine because, right, it's not my life, but it's important, not as a shaming or blaming, but as a rediscovery, I believe. Thank you for saying that.
Alistair?
Thank you, Tracy, for a magnificent telling of that tale, which is both familiar and foreign to me. It was so beautifully and sensuously done. I was filled with joy listening to it. But it connected with me as a male identifying person because yesterday I celebrated Beltane, the Celtic festival of midsummer, which falls halfway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. And I did my goddess rituals and invoked the goddesses, and so for me, that story brings, because we all learn something from myths. That's why they are great stories. But for me, there are a couple of things that come to mind. One is that in many ways, our thoughts create our reality. And this myth illustrates that so beautifully. Demeter's fear about what would happen to her daughter Persephone when she wandered came true. She was kidnapped. So in a sense, Demeter's fear was part of that event. As her grief at her daughter's disappearance was part of the coming of winter, and her joy at meeting Baubo and dancing her dance of creation brought summer and joy to the earth. So thank you for reminding us of this cycle of love and death, which is so much an essential part of life.
Indeed. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you.
Pratigya?
Yes, Eric. Tracy, such a beautiful, beautiful story. And of course, the telling was wonderful. I think the story is going to keep coming back to me for the next few days, and I'm going to keep exploring layers and layers of it. Thank you so much. And I love the imagery. Every single scene was so vivid, so clear. I think what stayed the most with me for some reason is the warmth of the granite. I can so clearly picturize that. Thank you, Tracy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Pratigya. Thank you. And yeah, I just want to say, like, the layers of this story are rich. Like this story, now you are carriers of this story. And whether you are conscious of it or it goes into the terrain of the subconscious, and you know, revisit the story. Where are you in the story? Allow the story to play with you over the course of the next few weeks, or for the whole season, for that matter.
I'm muted. The recording of the session will be on YouTube. You'll all receive the link.
Right.
Okay, so shall we say good night and good morning? In this day and age of global unrest, we have done our best to make some good culture.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for your continued efforts. Your dedication is remarkable, and it's a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet, did you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted the name of the book and the author, please.
Okay, I'll just drop it into the chat. How's that? I'll say it as well. It's Kathleen. I'm going to make sure this is going to everyone. Carolyn McVicker Edwards, and it's called Sun Stories.
But you know, it's such a famous story. If you just you know, type Persephone or Demeter into the wiki page, you'll find versions of the story there too.
Yeah, and old Baubo. Don't forget Baubo.
Yes, she plays a very important part in the story.
Right, that was what I was looking for.
Yeah.
That version.
Enjoy your discovery, Janet.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Janet, did you get the material from the chat section? Well, anyway,
yes,
we'll
yes, I got it. Thank you, thank you.
Good. Okay.
Session.
Bye, everybody.